I've kind of always had a connection with oysters just in general. Growing up on the Chesapeake Bay, that's just something that you just learn growing up that's super important to restore, and that has a lot of conservation efforts around it.
Brian Russell. I am a member of Shore Thing Shellfish and president of the Southern Maryland Shellfish Growers Association. I basically grew up on the water because my dad's a waterman, has been a waterman all his life. And in 2009, when the state streamlined the aquaculture policies, a friend of mine asked me if I was interested in growing oysters for a living. And so we kind of started Shore Thing in 2009, kind of started thinking about how to get into that, and from there we just kind of grew. And in addition to having our oyster farm and also being a commercial, my dad and I do some commercial oyster harvest, a wild oyster harvest in the winter months. I'm also the president of our local, Southern Maryland Shellfish Growers Association. Kind of represent about 20 or 30 growers in the Growers Association.
Mandy Birch, Shore Thing Shellfish, co-owner. They provide a lot of benefits to the water quality and to the ecosystem. But as far as the farming goes, we're able to provide oysters to restaurants and farmers markets and shuck houses and things like that contribute economically, ecologically. There's just nothing bad about oysters. I think they just are so helpful in so many ways, so we're glad to be able to be a part of that field, I guess.
I think that a lot of people have kind of just like one perspective of what's going on, and the conversation, we're leaving a lot of people out of the conversation as far as like how do we move aquaculture forward. I feel like one of the challenges I had was really kind of just being settled into a male-dominated field and just like really trying to find myself in that sort of space and how I operate and how I was going to let it affect me and my work and where I wanted to take my career. You know, as you kind of go on, you kind of learn tips and tricks and different resources and things, and then you find incredible women that are also in the industry, and then you compare notes, and that's how, you know, you really form those relationships. With my nonprofit, Minorities in Aquaculture, it's really looking at how has the industry and the progression of it just historically really impacted certain communities. And when you look at the demographics of just aquaculture in general in the United States, women of color are a double minority, as women are the first. And so just being kind of in that double minority, in that demographic, I just felt like it was really important, because aquaculture is super important, that, you know, more women of color have the opportunity just to get into it, just to explore it as a career, just to get to explore it on all different types of sectors. And then now in my kind of academia phase of my career, I'm starting my master's program, also looking at kind of the social science parts and anthropology parts of aquaculture, and just really trying to dissect what are the actual barriers that minorities are facing, what are some of the obstacles that they're having, and how, like, what suggestions can, you know, I give or find out from other people within kind of that diversity and inclusion movement, what we can do to actually help to have like active minority engagement. So just kind of all around, I feel like in this phase of both of those, it's just really like the social science part, just really connecting with people and trying to just like show that the industry is as important as people should think of it, because there's a lot of misinformation about aquaculture right now.
Most of our challenges are with legislative issues proposed by waterfront homeowners that don't really want us in front of their homes. It's a lack of education for homeowners and lack of promotion to waterfront homeowners because they're our biggest adversary. They're the ones that are kind of causing the slowdown in the industry growth right now. I think some education and promotion of the bay oyster everywhere across the nation. You know, back at the turn of the 20th century, Chesapeake Bay oysters were known across the United States. The Midwest was one of the biggest buyers of Chesapeake Bay oysters, and you know, they were shipping millions of bushels of oysters by rail car, and back in the early 1900s, and now there's how many 100 million more Americans that can be possible consumers of oysters, but you know, that's not the case. So I think a little bit more promotion for Chesapeake Bay oysters in general, I think that would be a big help. We're a part of the industry, and so you know, I feel like everything we do is helping the industry to grow and to help promote oysters everywhere. So everybody we talk to, you know, everybody that comes up and asks me, you know, oh, what do you do for a living? And you say, well, I'm an oyster farmer. And they're like, well, that's different. That's interesting. You know, how does that work? And so then you get into conversing with them, and you find out, and you're spreading information about the good that oysters do for the bay, and also the good that it does for the economics of the state. And you try to help promote all the good things that oysters are, and and I feel like everything we do, it's for the betterment of the entire oyster industry.
Fortunately, we have multiple products. Like, we have our oysters, but we also build our own gear. We sell oyster floats to homeowners, and they get a tax credit for that. We sell services, like we'll plant spat on shell to folks. We do restoration projects. And just in general, it's nice to have a plethora of options so that we can have business year-round.
Aquaculture is not just farming oysters, it's restoration. And so with growing oysters, you're providing habitat for so many organisms. So you pull up the cage, and every day it's a little different. Sometimes you find seahorses. We always find small gobies and fish, and those are food for bigger fish, predatory perch, striped bass. We find black sea bass, which you don't see very often in the bay. You know, blue crabs, mud crabs, all kinds of really cool critters. So that what I find very neat is we have a 2-acre water column lease with our almost 1,000 oyster cages on it. And before we put those oyster cages there, it was basically barren mud bottom. And now we go out there, and the fish hang out underneath our boat when we're working. You know, you can look down and see schools of perch and small rockfish, and you know, all these gobies and blennies, and you know, that come up in the cage, and when they go back overboard, it's just a feeding frenzy. So we're helping create habitat where there wasn't anything before, and I think that. And then the other side of that is our oysters being there, or helping as that water moves across our oyster lease. It's getting filtered all the time, constantly. So 1,000 oyster cages with several thousand oysters in each cage, you know, and each oyster filters however many gallons of water in a day, and you're basically setting up a filter site for the bay.
I think a lot of times people see us as the enemy, like they see the corks on the water and it messes up their view. And I get that, I understand that. But I think what they don't understand is all the benefits that people get from an oyster farm in general. And if they could just see below the surface of the water and see what all's going on down there, not just the oysters, but all the animals and the sediment being kind of taken out of suspension in the water. There's just so many benefits to aquaculture that I wish more people would know about.
So it's just really having that conversation with everybody at the table, as far as like, not just as far as like diversity and inclusion, but just as far as like, you know, traditional watermen, people who make policies, just, you know, nonprofits and environmental organizations, just people like that. So we can all bring our resources together to kind of figure out what the solutions are, and which areas of aquaculture like really need more people to like really invest their time into. But I think it's a struggle because of the kind of misconceptions that have been going on for years and years, and the relationships that have been going on between academia and commercial and traditional watermen and aquaculture. We just haven't been able to like level out. And so I think that that conversation kind of needs to be had to really like see how we're going to move forward, not just in the Chesapeake Bay, but just in aquaculture throughout the United States.